Well, we've been through 9 games and 9 reviews so far. Now it's time for Fire Emblem to hit double digits. Game number 10. This is Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. It's a sequel to Path of Radiance, and it's got the highest production value in the whole series, with the best graphics to date and an excellent soundtrack, and even has more voice acting and more cutscenes. And it's released on the Nintendo Wii pretty close to launch day, if I remember right. Fire Emblem fans were hyped for this one. Our questions were going to be answered and the story would reach a glorious epic conclusion. So it will probably surprise you to find out that Radiant Dawn is actually a game I don't like as much as the others, because in my opinion, Radiant Dawn is where Fire Emblem starts to fall behind a little bit. I suppose that's a little harsh, and it also might be Path of Radiance setting a very high bar to clear, at least in my eyes, but starting with Radiant Dawn, I feel as though Fire Emblem has taken a weird turn in terms of game design. They've never really gone back to the GBA GameCube days, and those games make up the 4 best Fire Emblem games in the whole series to me. Now that could be nostalgia talking, of course, but I hope I can at least make my case with this review. I don't consider Radiant Dawn a horrible mess. It's fairly okay, but its predecessor remains my favorite in the whole series. So, here we go. Radiant Dawn starts with you picking a difficulty level like always. Now, it should be noted that Radiant Dawn includes normal, hard, and maniac levels just like in Path of Radiance, but the US version of Radiant Dawn doesn't remove maniac mode. Instead, it renamed the difficulty levels to easy, normal, and hard. Now this has the effect of making people think Radiant Dawn is extremely difficult, because when they select normal mode, they're actually selecting hard mode, and when they select hard mode, they're actually selecting maniac mode. Now, I initially refused to play on the quote-unquote easy mode because, it's easy mode. I don't need an easy mode, I'm a Fire Emblem veteran. But no, easy mode is actually the normal mode, and hard mode is like the... You see how confusing this is? However, this game's Maniac mode does something that I honestly don't understand either, because it makes changes to the gameplay that make the game artificially harder instead of just relying on the increased enemy stats or changed enemy layouts like normal. In Radiant Dawn's Maniac mode, you're not allowed to view enemy attack ranges, you have to count it all out yourself. This is one of those features that made your life easier in Path of Radiance without making the game itself easier. Taking it away just adds needless annoyance to the game. You also can't save anytime in battle like you can on the normal difficulties. Like, I know it's overpowered to be able to save anywhere and reload anytime you want, like you can effectively save state your way through the game, but the battle saves honestly should have just been a suspend feature if that's the case. But the dumbest change to Maniac mode, in my opinion, is that they disabled the weapon triangle. An actual game mechanic, one that allowed the player to reduce the amount of luck involved in combat, just gets outright disabled on the hardest difficulty. Oh well, at least it's only an unlockable difficulty that you don't have to play. Nobody would be dumb enough to disable the weapon triangle in an entire game, right? You're also able to import a save from Path of Radiance, assuming you aren't playing on a Wii U or one of the later Wii releases or something. What a data transfer does is it takes any unit from Path of Radiance who hit the max level, checks for any stat that was capped, and if it was, the unit gets +2 to that stat when they reappear in Radiant Dawn. That goes for weapon ranks and support bonuses as well. If you collected any of the seemingly useless coins in Path of Radiance, they're added to your inventory in Radiant Dawn as well. It's ultimately not much and looks like merely a bonus for anybody who played the previous game. The problem is that certain supports achieved in Path of Radiance actually affect scenes later on in Radiant Dawn. Nothing big, but how you're supposed to find out about these differences is beyond me. Oh, and in the US version, having an easy mode save from Path of Radiance when attempting the transfer crashes the game in older prints of Radiant Dawn. Nice job. So, Radiant Dawn picks up where the previous game left off and begins in Dan. After the war in the previous game, Dan was occupied by the Benyon government, and they've been oppressing the civilians. Our main character is Micaiah, a light magic user and fortune teller of sorts who is part of a ragtag rebel group aiming to remove the occupying soldiers and give Dan back to its people. So far this is looking pretty promising as you've got characters and a setting with some potential. However, Micaiah's part of the story is actually only about 12 chapters long. It's not a tutorial like Lynn's story, it's actually the first of 4 acts in the story, and when Act 1 is over, Act 2 starts up with a brand new set of characters, and this is the first issue I have with Radiant Dawn. The first 3 acts each concern a different group of characters, meaning any work done to build up your army doesn't really pay off until Act 4, while all your characters come together for the finale. What's more, Micaiah's group, the Dawn Brigade, almost entirely consists of some of the most underpowered and awful units in the whole series. This is because of the way the class tiers work. There used to be just 2 tiers of class, promoted and unpromoted, but now there is a 3rd tier of class to promote into. I get the feeling they added that so people wouldn't wonder why the Path of Radiance cast is unpromoted in this game, because they all start at tier 2 and the Dawn Brigade starts at tier 1. But tier 1 is so underpowered that when they rejoin everybody in Act 4, they look pathetic because they are. Oh, and if one of them dies permanently, doesn't really matter, you're getting a new bandit in the next act anyways. Now, to me, Fire Emblem is about building up a team of super soldiers over the course of a full campaign, and if you lose one, your punishment is to either reset the chapter or use a subpar replacement. Radiant Dawn ended up being a very different game for me, and I'm not sure I like it as much. Then you have the overall story. Act 1 is okay, it has some good stuff in it, but Act 2 is frequently criticized for having little to do with the plot at large. Act 2 focuses on Alencia, the princess from the previous game, who is now queen. She's finding adjusting to her position difficult, having gotten there after fighting a war, and the people don't seem to be excited for her either, especially when they decide to start a rebellion because, you know, we're at peace and everything's okay now, but sure, rebellion for no good reason means more filler gameplay. I don't hate Act 2 myself, but given how often it shifts focus from one character group to the next, I can certainly say this would be better off as a side story or a trial map or something, not filler in the main campaign. Maybe they were dead set on involving every character from Path of Radiance in the sequel, which is not something you want to do as a writer. It's too easy to hurt the story by shoehorning in every character you can. I feel Radiant Dawn is comparable to Mystery of the Emblem because both are direct sequels featuring old characters as well as new ones, and it's honestly pretty clear to me which of the two handle its cast better. You don't need to start everyone from Path of Radiance at Tier 2 and have them promote again to Tier 3, and you certainly don't need all the old characters to appear again as well as enough new ones for a roster of like 80 plus characters. It's just like Binding Blade had the biggest character cast until Radiant Dawn happened, and that's pretty impressive if you're surpassing Binding Blade's character cast here. So to keep this from being a plot-only complaint fest, let's talk about the positives for a little while before we get back to the plot. Gameplay-wise, Radiant Dawn is mostly the same as its predecessor, although you can't steal nearly as many staves because they get equipped now. Equipping a staff affects the holder in some way. Most notably, healers can now heal themselves with the staff by equipping it. In addition, if Restore is equipped, it'll self-cure any status effects. If Barrier is equipped, it'll boost the healer's defensive stats. And a rather humorous inclusion is that staff users can now counterattack enemies with their staff if they're attacked, usually for 0 damage. But when you start getting the later staffs in the game, it's actually possible to turn a bishop into a physical fighter, which is the most humorous thing ever. If you're a fan of unorthodox methods of play like I am, give this a try, it's worth a laugh or two. Lagoo's characters work mostly the same, but again, they can fight back even when untransformed, just not as well, and they get to shapeshift faster if they do damage, so it's a risk versus reward type deal. You're even allowed to shapeshift when you want, instead of the game forcing you to, so these are some good changes. Skills are back, but this time if you take a skill off a character, you get the scroll back and it can assign it to someone else. While I like this, even skills known innately can be removed, meaning that skills aren't all that much a unique part of the character anymore. They're like pieces of equipment. 2 characters, Edward and Leonardo, have skills that really don't work for their classes, so what you can do is switch them around to make them useful. I don't exactly hate being able to take the skill off and assign it to somebody else, but I feel that this kind of removes some of the individuality of the character, because now you can just take the skill off Leonardo and never use him again if you like, or even sell the skill scroll for money. The Forge feature returns, which means you can still make custom weapons, and this time you're allowed to do it as much as you like in one chapter. Just keep a small eye on your gold, because it's not infinite. Other than that, forging is the same as Path of Radiance, except now if you have a coin item, you can select a random card that adds an additional bonus, such as more crit, more accuracy, more damage, or you could get the card that gives you 4 more coins. Yeah, this is what transferring coins from Path of Radiance is for, and you can even save scum for the bonus you want, just like you could with bonus experience. This even lets you get weapons with more damage or crit without even paying extra, because the coin boost is free, but the base cost for any custom weapon is the same as the normal item's cost. I'd like to see a run using only forged weapons, that'd be something. Another feature added to Radiant Dawn are bargain items. These are single purchase items available for one chapter only, so if you want one, better get it while you can. I'd have liked to have a bigger variety of these available, so players have to make choices though. I wound up buying all of the bargain items in every chapter they were in when I played this game. Yeah, a little more choice would have been nice. And now it's time to start complaining some more. Now, it should be noted, as I have probably made it clear by now, that the character cast includes both new people and almost everyone from Path of Radiance. Well, except for Largo, which means no berserkers. That's a massive cast, more so even than Binding Blade. No way they could write support conversations for every last one of them, right? Well, they didn't. The conversation part of the support system is mostly gone. Not completely, but we don't get nearly the in-depth conversations from the previous games. The good news is anybody can support anybody, so making strategic use of the support system is more feasible, and there are some unique conversations and a goofy line or two, but the conversations were a big part of the supports in the previous game, so it's unfortunate to not have that. So getting back to the plot, and I'm gonna go in-depth here, so spoilers are approaching. Act 3 begins with the Laguz forming an allegiance and declaring war on Benyon after they find out Benyon was behind the extinction of an entire species of Laguz. And guess who the Laguz hire as mercenaries? It's Ike and Co. from Path of Radiance. They're back and they're stronger than ever. It's worth noting that Ike became popular enough to appear in the latest Super Smash Bros. Game as a playable character in place of Roy, something that annoys Roy fans naturally. Actually, this may have been a marketing ploy to get Radiant Dawn some more attention because nearly all of the Fire Emblem related Smash Bros. Content relates to the setting of Radiant Dawn. There's a Lyn assist trophy and Marth's still there, but other trophies are all Radiant Dawn. It's really weird. Anyways, with Ike's help, Benyon is on the ropes, so they decide to bust out their trump card, and this is the big one. This is easily the most controversial plot twist up to this point because it comes out of nowhere with no build-up. Daeon's under new management, you see, and the new king, the young dark magic user Pilius, has been tricked into signing a blood pact with Benyon. What is a blood pact? Signing it means you have to do everything the pact maker says or else your entire kingdom is destroyed. The citizens die one at a time of sickness. Benyon then uses this to force Daeon to join them as allies, which means the Dawn Brigade gets to fight Ike and his mercenaries. This won't be one-sided, I'm sure. Okay, so who in the heck would willingly sign a blood pact? Are there benefits to it? The game tells us that the victims of the pacts used in the game were tricked into signing, but seriously, they didn't just read the paper they were writing their names on. Did the signatures get copied onto the pact? And if the pact maker can evoke the curse whenever they feel like it, doesn't this give Benyon the magic equivalent of a tactical fucking nuke? And it gets worse. To break the curse of the pact, you need to kill one of the people involved. So Pilius, being the genius that he is, decides to kill himself. This does absolutely nothing, however, because then they find out you also need to destroy the document, so that death was a complete and total waste, but, if you are on a second playthrough, you can refuse to kill Pilius because you know that it won't change anything. But the characters don't know this, so what kind of sense does it make? I'm sorry, but no matter how you slice it, this whole thing comes out extremely messy. They even go so far as to say that this was how Mad King Ashnard, the previous game's villain, came to power, tricking his father into signing, telling him how to break the curse, and then getting him to off himself and destroy the document. The Krolaguz also betray you more times than I care to count, because their ruler is bound by a blood pact too. Fortunately, the whole blood pact thing gets put on hold in Act 4, where 99% of the continent's population gets turned to stone. See, All that warring that was happening was part of Benion's plan to awaken the dark god Yune, who was sleeping in the medallion Ike's sister carries around. Doing so would awaken the goddess Ashura, who swore she'd wake up and unleash her judgment if humans spilt enough blood to awaken Yune. Now Ashura is going to wreck the continent for good. Luckily, it turns out Yune isn't evil and is going to help Ike and Co. stop Ashura. Now, about this whole turn to stone thing, I don't know if the game tells you why the player's party is spared from being petrified. You could assume Yune protected them, but we're also shown an NPC unrelated to anything who was also spared, so I can only assume that Ashura's petrification thing randomly and conveniently just doesn't work. Isn't that special? Some goddess you turned out to be, Ashura. And then we have the Black Knight. The Black Knight was an antagonist in Path of Radiance who killed Ike's father and did a lot of other bad stuff. In Path of Radiance, it was possible for Ike to kill the Black Knight, or not kill him in time and flee the area. Either way, it's a pretty epic scene because the game was building up to this moment where Ike finally avenges his father. So naturally, he comes back alive and well in Radiant Dawn, complete with an "I let you win" excuse. I guess that's better than the Japanese script, which stated that the Black Knight lost because of, I kid you not, steroid abuse. But in Radiant Dawn, he comes back for another round, which honestly cheapens the build-up and payoff of his battle in the previous game. See, another neat detail of Path of Radiance is that if you fail to kill the Black Knight, he appears in the game's ending unmasked with nobody realizing who he is. But if you killed him, he's not there at all in the ending, suggesting he really did in fact die. Why else wouldn't he show up? But if he's going to canonically survive the fight either way, why include a detail like that? Does he need to appear in Radiant Dawn so we can discover his true identity? Why not just find the body and take the armor off, or have someone else reveal it? Was Radiant Dawn in the hands of a different writer, or did they just not plan that far ahead? Anyway, that was a long rant on one character, I know, but I hope it illustrated my point about the writers and their desire to include every character from Path of Radiance. In fact, it's not even just the Black Knight. One bishop boss who turned out to be a fan favorite is revived and can even be recruited in this game, though with him, at least the comic relief payoff is certainly worth it. So anyhow, at the end of the game, Ike kills Ashura and steals Alm's title for most epic boss kill in Fire Emblem. Everybody gets unstoned and they're all buddies now. So there you have it. Radiant Dawn unfortunately doesn't live up to the game it's a sequel to in my eyes. Maybe Path of Radiance was just a tough act to follow, but the structure of Radiant Dawn made it a very different experience from the previous games, not to mention a plotline that tries to involve every playable character in Path of Radiance in addition to the new people, and gives Ike the biggest spotlight due to him being a fan favorite. I suppose every series is going to have a dud from time to time, but the hype behind this one made me really feel it. Let's hope they learn from the mistakes here. Next up, we get a blast from the past and revisit the games that put Fire Emblem on the map in a new form on the Nintendo DS.